The lab mixed up my results with my husband's. It saved my life. I was holding two lab reports in my hands, staring at numbers that didn't make sense, when my entire world shifted on its axis. Mrs. Patterson? The receptionist's voice seemed to come from underwater. Is everything all right? I looked up from the crumpled papers, my vision blurring slightly. The waiting room of Henderson Medical Lab suddenly felt too bright, too sterile, too small. These results, they're not mine. She glanced at her computer screen, then back at me with that practiced smile healthcare workers perfect. I'm sorry, what seems to be the issue? The name says Sarah Patterson, but these numbers. I held up the first report, my hand trembling slightly. This shows elevated white blood cell count, abnormal lymphocytes, and a note about possible hematological malignancy requiring immediate oncology consultation. The medical terminology felt foreign in my mouth, like speaking a language I'd never learned. The second report bore my husband's name in bold letters across the top, Mark Patterson. But instead of his usual cholesterol panel, it showed hormone levels and something called synthetic testosterone suppressants with a note that read, patient appears to be taking fertility-inhibiting medications. Recommend discontinuation if attempting conception. My throat went dry. We'd been trying to get pregnant for 8 months. Ma'am, I'll need to check with our lab technician. The receptionist's fingers flew across her keyboard. Sometimes there are administrative mix-ups. Administrative mix-ups. As if my marriage and potentially my life were just filing errors. I sank back into the uncomfortable plastic chair, clutching both reports. Around me, other patients scrolled through their phones or flipped through outdated magazines, blissfully unaware that their test results might be sitting in someone else's hands. The thought made my stomach lurch. Mrs. Patterson? A thin man in a white coat emerged from the back hallway. His name tag read David Chin, lab technician. He looked young, maybe late 20s, with nervous energy radiating from every gesture. I understand there's been some confusion about your results. Confusion? I stood up, my voice sharper than intended. Your lab mixed up my blood work with my husband's. According to this, I weighed the paper with my name on it, I might have leukemia. And according to this one, I held up Mark's report, my husband has been secretly taking fertility blockers while we've been spending thousands on ovulation kits and fertility consultations. David's face went pale. He glanced around the waiting room, clearly aware that other patients were now listening. Perhaps we could discuss this privately in. No. The word came out harder than I intended. I want to know how this happened. I want to know how many other patients have received incorrect results. And I want to know what you're going to do about it. He shifted uncomfortably, his clipboard clutched against his chest like a shield. These things happen sometimes. The important thing is that we've caught the error before any harm was done. Before any harm was done? I stared at him in disbelief. Mr. Chen, if these results are accurate, then harm has already been done. Either I have cancer that needs immediate treatment, or someone else does and they just walked out of here thinking they're perfectly healthy. The waiting room had gone completely silent now. Even the receptionist had stopped typing. David's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. Mrs. Patterson, I really think we should discuss this privately. Lab protocols are complex, and sometimes people die because of mistakes like this. The color drained completely from David Chen's face. He glanced toward the back hallway, then at the receptionist, who was pretending to be absorbed in her computer screen but obviously hanging on every word. Mrs. Patterson, please, he said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. These are very serious allegations you're making. Allegations? I felt something cold and sharp settle in my chest. Mr. Chen, are you telling me that one of these reports is wrong? He hesitated for just a moment too long. What I'm saying is that lab work is complicated, and there are many factors that can influence. Which report belongs to whom? I cut him off, standing up straighter. It's a simple question. David's eyes darted to the hallway again. I had the distinct impression he was looking for backup, or maybe an escape route. I would need to verify our internal records before I could make any definitive statements about. Stop. I held up my hand. Just stop talking for a second and listen to me very carefully. The entire waiting room was dead silent now. An elderly man with a cane had actually put down his newspaper. A pregnant woman in the corner was staring openly. My husband Mark Patterson came in last Tuesday at 2:15 p.m. for his annual physical blood work. I came in this morning at 9:30 a.m. for my routine labs. We both had blood drawn by your staff, and now I'm holding two reports that have been switched. What I need to know is whether the blood work showing possible leukemia belongs to me or to him. David was sweating now, small beads forming along his hairline. Mrs. Patterson, I understand your concern, but patient confidentiality laws prevent me from discussing. Patient confidentiality? My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. He's my husband, and these reports have both our names on them. Your lab already violated confidentiality when you handed me his results. That's not exactly how HIPAA regulations work, he stammered. Then explain to me exactly how they work when your lab has potentially sent someone home with cancer thinking they're healthy, while someone else is about to rush to an oncologist unnecessarily. I could see the exact moment when the full weight of the situation hit him. His shoulders sagged slightly, and he looked like he might be sick. There's more, isn't there? I pressed. This isn't the first time this has happened. I never said that. You didn't have to. Your reaction says everything. I looked around the waiting room, where at least a dozen people were now watching us with growing alarm. How many people are sitting here right now with the wrong results? How many people walked out of here yesterday with someone else's blood work? Mrs. Patterson, you're creating unnecessary panic. I'm creating necessary panic, I corrected. Because if this is a systemic problem with your lab's procedures, then every single person in this room has a right to know their results might be wrong. David looked desperately toward the receptionist, who was now on the phone, speaking in urgent, hushed tones. Calling his supervisor, most likely. Look, he said, attempting a different approach, let me pull your original samples from storage. We can run everything again, get you definitive results within 48 hours. No charge, of course. 48 hours? I stared at him. If I actually have leukemia, 48 hours could be the difference between early stage and advanced. And if Mark has it instead, he's at home right now, completely unaware. I understand the urgency, but these things take time. Then you better find a way to make them take less time. The supervisor who emerged from the back offices looked like she'd rather be anywhere else in the world. Dr. Patricia Holbrook, according to her nameplate, was probably in her 50s with steel gray hair pulled into a severe bun. Her expression suggested this wasn't her first crisis management situation. Mrs. Patterson, I'm Dr. Holbrook, the lab director. I understand there's been some confusion with your results. Confusion seems to be everyone's favorite word today, I said, still clutching both reports. What I have is a life-threatening mix-up that your technician here seems more interested in covering up than fixing. Dr. Holbrook shot David a look that could have frozen nitrogen. Mr. Chen, please return to your station. I'll handle this. David scurried away like a scolded child, leaving me face to face with someone who actually seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. Mrs. Patterson, would you please accompany me to my office so we can sort this out properly? Will sorting it out take 48 hours like your technician suggested? Her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. That depends on several factors. Please, let's discuss this privately. I glanced around the waiting room, where every patient was now obviously eavesdropping. The pregnant woman had her phone out, probably texting someone about the drama unfolding in front of her. The elderly man was leaning forward on his cane, straining to catch every word. Actually, Dr. Holbrook, I think I prefer to discuss this right here. These people deserve to know if their results might be wrong too. Mrs. Patterson, you're making accusations that could seriously damage this facility's reputation based on what might be a simple clerical error. Simple? I held up both reports. Your lab has potentially diagnosed me with cancer while my husband has been secretly taking fertility suppressants. Which part of that seems simple to you? Something flickered across her face, surprise, maybe, or recognition. You said fertility suppressants? According to his report, yes. Synthetic testosterone suppressants with a recommendation to discontinue if attempting conception. I watched her carefully. We've been trying to get pregnant for 8 months while spending $3,000 on fertility treatments. Dr. Holbrook was quiet for a long moment, studying my face. Mrs. Patterson, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. Has your husband been experiencing any unusual symptoms lately? Fatigue, frequent infections, unexplained bruising? My blood went cold. Why would you ask me that? Because if the leukemia markers belonged to him, those symptoms would be consistent with early-stage disease. The waiting room had gone completely silent again. I could hear the hum of fluorescent lights overhead, the distant sound of traffic outside, my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. He has been tired, I said slowly. He's been getting sick more often than usual. Last month he had this cold that lasted 3 weeks, and I kept telling him to see a doctor, but he said it was just work stress. Any bruising? I thought back to the past few weeks. His legs. He said he bumped into his desk at work, but the bruises seemed extensive for just bumping into furniture. Dr. Holbrook nodded grimly. Mrs. Patterson, I think we need to fast-track both sets of results. I'm going to personally oversee retesting both samples, and we'll have definitive answers by tomorrow morning. Tomorrow morning? I'm calling in our night shift supervisor. This takes priority over everything else. She paused, then added, and Mrs. Patterson? You need to call your husband. Now. Why? Because if those leukemia markers are his, and he's been hiding fertility suppressants from you, there might be other things he's not telling you about his health. The implication hit me like a physical blow. Mark hadn't just been sabotaging our attempts to conceive, he might have been hiding a cancer diagnosis while I spent months blaming my own body for our inability to get pregnant. I sat in my car outside Henderson Medical Labs for 20 minutes, staring at my phone. Mark's contact photo smiled back at me, a picture from our vacation to Napa Valley 2 years ago, back when we still believed our biggest problem was choosing between the wine-tasting tour or the hot air balloon ride. My fingers hovered over his number 3 separate times before I finally dialed. Hey babe, his voice was warm, familiar. How did the blood work go? Everything normal? The casual tone in his voice made my stomach clench. Mark, I need you to come home. Right now. What's wrong? You sound weird. The lab mixed up our results. I took a shaky breath. I have your blood work, and you have mine. There was a pause. Then, okay, that's annoying, but they'll fix it, right? These things happen. These things happen. The same dismissive phrase everyone kept using, as if medical mix-ups were as common as coffee shop order mistakes. Mark, your results show that you've been taking testosterone suppressants. Fertility blockers. I waited for his response, but the line went completely quiet. Mark? I'm here. We've been trying to have a baby for 8 months. We spent $3,000 on fertility specialists. I've been charting my ovulation, taking supplements, cutting out caffeine, my voice cracked. And you've been taking medication to make sure it couldn't happen. Sarah, I can explain. Can you also explain the elevated white blood cell count? The abnormal lymphocytes? The recommendation for immediate oncology consultation? Another long silence. When he spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper. What are you talking about? According to my lab report, which is apparently actually yours, you might have leukemia. Early stage, but requiring immediate treatment. I pressed my forehead against the steering wheel. Please tell me you didn't know about this. Sarah, I swear to God, I had no idea about any cancer markers. You have to believe me. What about the fertility suppressants, Mark? Did you have no idea about those either? The pause stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Finally, I need to see you. Face to face. This isn't a phone conversation. Answer the question. Sarah. Answer the fucking question, Mark. Did you know you were taking fertility blockers while we were trying to conceive? I heard him exhale slowly. Yes. The single word hit me like a physical blow. I'd been hoping, even expecting him to deny it, to claim it was another lab error, another impossible mix-up. But the quiet admission cut through every excuse I'd been prepared to make for him. Why? It's complicated. Complicated? My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. We've been married for 6 years. I've been your wife for 6 years, and you've been actively preventing us from having the family we've been planning since our wedding day. What's complicated about that? I wasn't ready, he said, so quietly I almost couldn't hear him. I thought I was, but when it came down to actually trying, I panicked. I thought I'd have more time to figure it out, to get my head straight. So instead of talking to me, your wife, you decided to secretly sabotage our attempts while letting me think the problem was with my body? It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. I could see other patients walking in and out of the lab through my windshield, people who probably trusted that their results were accurate, that their medical team was competent. Mark, do you understand what this means? If these results are correct, you have cancer. You might have had it for months. The bruising, he said suddenly. And I've been so tired lately. I thought it was stress from work, from hiding the fertility thing from you. You thought keeping secrets from your wife was stressful? Imagine how stressful it's been living with a liar. Sarah, please. I'm coming home. We're going to sit down with both of these reports, and you're going to explain everything. Every pill you've been taking, every lie you've told, every doctor's appointment you might have hidden from me. I started the engine with shaking hands. Because if you've been hiding a cancer diagnosis on top of everything else, I don't even know who I'm married to anymore. I love you, he said desperately. Whatever happens, you have to know that I love you. Love doesn't lie, Mark. Love doesn't sabotage. Love doesn't hide medical conditions from the person who's supposed to be your partner in everything. I hung up and drove home to confront a stranger who happened to share my last name. The 20-minute drive home felt like hours. Every red light gave me more time to think, to imagine the conversation waiting for me, to wonder how many other lies were about to surface. By the time I pulled into our driveway, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely turn off the ignition. Mark was waiting on the front porch, still wearing his work clothes, navy slacks and a white button-down that now seemed too big for his frame. Had he always looked this thin, this pale? Or was I just seeing him clearly for the first time in months? Sarah, he started as I walked up the steps, but I held up my hand. Inside. I want to see everything. Our living room had always been my sanctuary, soft gray couch, family photos on the mantel, the throw pillows I'd spent weeks choosing. Now it felt like a stage set for a conversation I never wanted to have. I spread both lab reports on the coffee table between us. Start with the fertility suppressants. When did you start taking them? Mark sat heavily in the armchair across from me, avoiding eye contact. January 15th. The precision of the date caught me off guard. You remember the exact day? It was the day after we had that fight about converting the spare bedroom into a nursery. You'd already picked out paint colors and started looking at cribs online. He rubbed his face with both hands. I realized I wasn't ready, but I didn't know how to tell you without destroying everything. So instead you destroyed it in secret. I picked up his lab report, scanning the medication levels again. These suppressants, where did you get them? They're prescription only. Dr. Martinez prescribed them. Your primary care physician prescribed fertility blockers while he knew we were trying to conceive? The betrayal felt layered now, extending beyond just Mark. What did you tell him? I told him the truth. That I was having second thoughts about starting a family but didn't know how to discuss it with you. And he thought the solution was to lie to me instead of referring us to couples counseling? Mark was quiet for a moment. He didn't recommend lying. That was my choice. I stared at the man I'd married, searching for any trace of the person who used to share every worry, every doubt, every random thought with me. What else haven't you told me? What do you mean? Mark, you've been taking medication for 4 months without telling me. You've been lying to my face every time I suggested we see a fertility specialist, every time I blamed myself for not getting pregnant. So I'll ask again, what else? He stood up and walked to the window, his back to me. There have been other appointments. My stomach dropped. What kind of appointments? In March, I started having night sweats. Dr. Martinez ordered some preliminary blood work. His voice was barely audible. The results were concerning. Concerning how? Elevated white blood cell count. He wanted to run more tests, but I canceled the follow-up appointment. The room seemed to tilt sideways. You canceled it? Mark, you might have had early warning signs of cancer, and you canceled the appointment? I was scared. He turned around to face me, and I could see tears in his eyes. I thought if I ignored it, maybe it would go away. Maybe the first test was wrong. While you were ignoring potentially having cancer, I was taking prenatal vitamins and scheduling my entire life around ovulation windows. My voice was rising again, but I didn't care. Do you understand how fucked up that is? I know how it sounds. How it sounds? Mark, it sounds like you've been living a completely separate life for months. You've been hiding medical appointments, test results, prescription medications. I stopped suddenly as another realization hit me. The insurance. All of these appointments and medications would show up on our insurance statements. His face went even paler. I've been paying cash. Paying cash. I repeated the words slowly, trying to process their implications. How much cash? The suppressants are $250 a month. The appointments with Dr. Martinez were $150 each. That's over $1,000 since January. I pulled out my phone and opened our banking app. Where did you get that money? I opened a separate account. The hits just kept coming. A separate account. With whose money? I've been doing some freelance consulting work on weekends. Graphics design for small businesses. He sat back down, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. Sarah, I know how this looks, but I never meant for it to go this far. How far did you mean for it to go, Mark? Were you planning to keep taking fertility blockers for the rest of our marriage? Or were you just buying time to figure out how to leave? I wasn't planning to leave. I just needed space to think. You needed space to think about whether you wanted to have children with me, so instead of talking to your wife, you decided to secretly ensure it couldn't happen while letting me believe my body was failing us. Mark was crying now, but I felt nothing. No sympathy, no urge to comfort him. Just a cold, clear anger that seemed to crystallize everything. The lab is rerunning both samples, I said, my voice steady. We'll have definitive results tomorrow morning. But Mark, regardless of who has cancer, our marriage is over. He looked up sharply. Sarah, please. No. You've been lying to me for 4 months about something that affects both of our lives fundamentally. You've stolen my choice, my time, and my trust. Whatever happens with these medical results, I can't be married to someone who handles problems by deceiving me. The silence stretched between us, broken only by the sound of his quiet crying and the tick of the antique clock his grandmother had left us. Tomorrow we'd find out which one of us was facing cancer. Tonight, I was facing the end of everything I thought I knew about my life. I called in sick to work the next morning and sat in Dr. Holbrook's office at 8:47 a.m., clutching a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. Mark sat beside me in the chair we'd positioned as far apart as the small space would allow. The distance between us felt like a canyon. I have your results, Dr. Holbrook said, settling behind her desk with 2 manila folders. Her expression was carefully neutral, which somehow made everything worse. But first, I need to address what we discovered during our investigation into the mix-up. Investigation? I set down my coffee cup, noting how my hand trembled slightly. Mrs. Patterson, when we reviewed our protocols after yesterday's incident, we found 17 cases of switched results in the past 6 months. 17. She paused, letting that number sink in. Your situation brought to light a systematic failure in our verification process. The room went silent except for the hum of her computer and Mark's sharp intake of breath. 17 people received incorrect results? Mark's voice cracked. What happened to them? We're in the process of contacting all affected patients. 3 cases involved cancer markers being switched with routine wellness panels. 1 patient spent 2 weeks believing they had stage 2 lymphoma when they were perfectly healthy. Another patient, she stopped abruptly. Another patient what? I pressed. Dr. Holbrook's jaw tightened. Another patient delayed seeking treatment for 6 weeks because they received clean results that weren't theirs. The delay may have impacted their prognosis. I felt sick. Someone might die because of your lab's mistakes. We're facing multiple lawsuits, yes. But right now, my priority is giving you accurate information. She opened the first folder. Mark, your blood work shows definitive markers for chronic lymphocytic leukemia, stage 1. The good news is that it's highly treatable when caught this early. Dr. Rebecca Santos at City General Oncology has agreed to see you this afternoon for treatment planning. The words seemed to echo in the small room. Mark made a sound like he'd been punched in the stomach. Sarah, Dr. Holbrook continued, opening the second folder, your results are completely normal. However, we also ran additional tests based on your husband's medication history. What kind of additional tests? We tested for synthetic hormones and found traces of the same testosterone suppressants in your system. I stared at her. That's impossible. I never took any suppressants. The levels suggest regular exposure over approximately 6 weeks. Dr. Patterson, have you been sharing any beverages, medications, or supplements with your wife? Mark's face had gone gray. The protein smoothies. What protein smoothies? But even as I asked, I knew. The daily smoothies Mark had started making for both of us in February. His new health kick, he'd called it. Something to boost our energy and prepare our bodies for pregnancy. I was crushing the suppressant pills into my morning protein powder, he whispered. But we've been sharing the container. I made smoothies for both of us almost every day. The betrayal somehow got deeper. You've been drugging me, Mark. For 6 weeks, you've been giving me fertility suppressants without my knowledge. I didn't mean to. You didn't mean to what? Put medication in food we were sharing? Or did you just not care if it affected me too? I turned to Dr. Holbrook. What does this mean for my fertility? Have these drugs damaged my ability to conceive? The levels in your system are much lower than your husband's therapeutic dose. Your reproductive function should return to normal within 4 to 6 weeks of discontinuing exposure. Should return to normal, I repeated. But you can't guarantee it. Medicine rarely comes with guarantees, Mrs. Patterson. But the prognosis is very good. I stood up abruptly, needing to move, needing air. So let me make sure I understand this correctly. My husband has been secretly taking fertility drugs for 4 months, accidentally dosing me for 6 weeks, hiding potential cancer symptoms, and your lab has been giving incorrect results to dozens of people. Is that an accurate summary? Mrs. Patterson, I know this is overwhelming. Overwhelming? I laughed, but it sounded harsh even to my own ears. Dr. Holbrook, I've discovered that my husband has been systematically lying to me while your facility has been endangering patients through gross negligence. Overwhelming doesn't begin to cover it. Mark reached for my hand, but I stepped away from him. Sarah, we can get through this. The cancer is treatable, and once the drugs are out of your system. There is no we anymore, Mark. I picked up my purse, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. You'll need someone to drive you to your oncology appointment this afternoon, but it won't be me. Where are you going? He asked desperately. I looked at Dr. Holbrook, who was watching this domestic crisis unfold in her office with obvious discomfort. I'm going to find a lawyer. 2 lawyers, actually. One to handle our divorce, and another to discuss the lab's liability for this entire mess. Mrs. Patterson, Dr. Holbrook said carefully, I hope you'll consider that we've been very cooperative in addressing this situation. Cooperative? I turned back to face her. You've been covering your ass while 17 people got incorrect medical results. That's not cooperation, Dr. Holbrook. That's damage control. I walked toward the door, then paused. Mark, I'll pack some clothes and stay at my sister's. You focus on your treatment. We'll discuss everything else through attorneys. The last thing I heard as I left was Mark calling my name, but I didn't look back. I spent 3 hours at Melissa and Associates, a law firm specializing in medical malpractice, laying out the entire nightmare for Rebecca Melissa, a sharp-eyed attorney in her 40s who took notes with the precision of a surgeon. So Henderson Labs has admitted to 17 cases of switched results in 6 months. She tapped her pen against her legal pad. And they documented this in writing? Dr. Holbrook mentioned it in front of my husband. I recorded the conversation on my phone. I pulled up the audio file, my hands steadier than they'd been in days. I started recording when she said they were facing multiple lawsuits. Rebecca's eyebrows shot up. Smart thinking. In Pennsylvania, you're allowed to record conversations you're party to without the other person's consent. She made another note. Tell me about the patient whose diagnosis was delayed 6 weeks. She didn't give me details, but she said the delay might impact their prognosis. I shifted in the leather chair, still processing everything. How many people do you think received wrong results and never found out? That's the million-dollar question, literally. Rebecca leaned back. Sarah, you stumbled onto what could be a massive case of systematic medical negligence. The fact that you only discovered the mix-up by chance means there could be dozens more cases they haven't identified. What about my husband drugging me? Is that criminal? Administering medication to someone without their knowledge or consent? Absolutely. That's assault, possibly poisoning charges. The fact that it was unintentional might reduce the severity, but it's still a crime. She paused, studying my face. Are you planning to press charges? The question hit me harder than expected. 6 months ago, Mark and I had been planning a vacation to Ireland for our 7th anniversary. Now I was sitting in a lawyer's office discussing whether to have him arrested. I don't know yet, I admitted. He's about to start cancer treatment, and despite everything, I don't want him to die. Those are separate issues, Sarah. His medical treatment won't be affected by criminal charges, and your decision about prosecution doesn't have to be made today. Rebecca closed her folder. What I can tell you is that we have grounds for a substantial malpractice suit against Henderson Labs. Their negligence endangered your health, delayed your husband's diagnosis, and violated basic medical standards. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister Julie. Mom called. She heard about Mark's diagnosis. She wants to know if you need anything. I'd forgotten that Mark might call our families. The thought of explaining this disaster to my parents made my stomach clench. There's something else, I said, looking back at Rebecca. If we sue Henderson Labs, it becomes public record, right? Our names, the details of what happened? Court filings are public, yes. Why? My husband works for Davidson Marketing. They handle healthcare accounts, including medical facilities. If this becomes public, it could destroy his career right when he needs insurance coverage for cancer treatment. Rebecca set down her pen. Sarah, I need to ask you something directly. Are you more concerned about your husband's reputation or your own justice? The question stung because I wasn't sure of the answer. Is it wrong that I don't want to destroy someone who's already facing cancer? It's not wrong to have complicated feelings about someone you loved for 6 years. But consider this, Henderson Labs is still operating, still processing blood work for hundreds of patients while knowing their system is flawed. How many more people might receive wrong results while you're protecting your husband's career? I thought about the pregnant woman in the waiting room, the elderly man with the cane, all the people who trusted that their results were accurate. Then I thought about Mark, pale and terrified in Dr. Holbrook's office, facing cancer treatment alone. What if we negotiate a settlement that includes mandatory reforms to their testing procedures? I asked. Money for us, but more importantly, changes that protect other patients? Rebecca smiled for the first time since I'd sat down. Now you're thinking like someone who wants justice, not just revenge. I think we can work with that approach. I scheduled a follow-up appointment for the next week and walked out of her office feeling something I hadn't experienced in days, a sense of control over at least part of this mess. I was sitting in my car outside Julie's apartment complex when my phone rang. Dr. Santos from City General Oncology. Mrs. Patterson? I'm calling about your husband's appointment this afternoon. He never showed up, and we haven't been able to reach him. My blood went cold. What do you mean he never showed up? His appointment was scheduled for 2:30 p.m. It's now 4:15, and our office has called his number 6 times. Given the urgency of his diagnosis, I wanted to check if there was an emergency. I hung up and immediately called Mark. Straight to voicemail. I tried the house phone, no answer. A sick feeling settled in my stomach as I drove across town to our house, running through possibilities. Had he decided to skip treatment? Was he too overwhelmed to face it? Or was something worse happening? His car was in the driveway, but the house was dark. I used my key, calling his name as I walked through rooms that suddenly felt foreign and hollow. I found him in our bedroom, sitting on the floor with his back against the bed, surrounded by pill bottles and papers. For one terrifying moment, I thought, but then he looked up, and his eyes were clear, just devastated. Sarah. His voice was hoarse. You came back. Dr. Santos called. You missed your oncology appointment. I stayed in the doorway, not sure if I should come closer or run. Mark, what is this? I gestured at the medication bottle scattered around him. I was trying to figure out when it all started. He picked up one of the bottles, the testosterone suppressants. January 15th, like I told you. But I found something else. He handed me a folded paper. A lab report dated March 28th, with his name and abnormal blood cell counts clearly marked. My hands started shaking as I read the doctor's notes. Recommend immediate hematology consultation. Patient advised of urgent nature. You've had this since March? I stared at the report, dated nearly 3 months ago. Mark, you've known about the cancer markers for 3 months. I told myself it might be wrong. That Dr. Martinez was being overly cautious. He pulled his knees up to his chest, looking like a lost child. I convinced myself that if I felt fine, the numbers didn't matter. While you felt fine, I was taking fertility supplements and tracking my temperature every morning. The betrayal somehow kept finding new depths. You watched me blame my body for 3 months while you knew you might have cancer. I was scared, Sarah. I've never been this scared of anything in my life. So you decided to make it my problem too by drugging me with your fertility suppressants? He flinched. That was an accident. I swear to God, I never meant for you to be exposed to those medications. But you meant to lie to me about the cancer. You meant to let me think I was failing us. I sat down heavily in the chair across from him, suddenly exhausted. Mark, why didn't you just tell me? 6 years of marriage, and you couldn't trust me with the truth? Because I knew you'd want to fight it head on, make appointments, research treatment options, turn our whole life upside down to deal with it. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. I wasn't ready for our life to become about cancer and hospitals and wondering if I was going to die. So instead you made our life about lies and secret medications and wondering why we couldn't get pregnant. The silence stretched between us, filled with the weight of 3 months of deception and a marriage that felt like it was dissolving in real time. Dr. Santos says chronic lymphocytic leukemia has a 90% 5-year survival rate when caught early, I said finally. You're probably going to live, Mark. But I don't know if we will. Mark looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. What do you mean? I mean I found a lawyer today. Rebecca Melissa at Melissa & Associates. I watched his face carefully. She specializes in medical malpractice, but she also explained that what you did to me, putting medication in my food without my knowledge, that's criminal assault. The color drained from his face completely. Sarah, you can't be serious. It was an accident. Was it? I pulled out my phone and scrolled to the notes I'd taken at the law office. Because according to the timeline we just established, you knew about the cancer markers on March 28th. But you didn't start making those protein smoothies for both of us until mid-February. Which means you were already planning to hide the fertility suppressants before you even got the cancer results. Mark's mouth opened and closed silently. I could see him trying to work through the dates, realizing what I'd figured out. The smoothies weren't about preparing our bodies for pregnancy, were they? They were about hiding the taste of crushed pills. I stood up, pacing to the window. How long were you planning to keep drugging me, Mark? It wasn't drugging, it was. What would you call secretly putting medication in someone's food? My voice stayed level, but I could feel something cold and sharp crystallizing in my chest. Because the prosecutor Rebecca consulted called it administering controlled substances without consent. That's a felony in Pennsylvania. Prosecutor? Mark scrambled to his feet, scattering pill bottles across the hardwood floor. Sarah, you can't involve prosecutors. My job, the insurance coverage, I need insurance for the cancer treatment. You should have thought about that before you started lying to me. I turned back to face him. But that's not even the worst part, Mark. Do you want to know what I discovered at Rebecca's office today? He didn't answer, just stared at me with growing panic. Henderson Labs has been mixing up results for 6 months. 17 confirmed cases of people getting wrong blood work. But here's the thing, they only found those cases by cross-referencing complaints and callbacks. Rebecca estimates there could be 50 or 60 cases they haven't identified yet. What does that have to do with us? It has everything to do with us, because we're the ones who exposed their systematic negligence. Which means we're the key witnesses in what's probably going to be a massive class action lawsuit. I picked up one of the scattered pill bottles, reading the label. Testosterone cypionate suppressant. Manufactured by Hendrix Pharmaceutical. Do you know who Hendrix's biggest client is for their advertising account? Mark's face went ashen. Davidson Marketing. Your company, Mark. Your company handles the marketing for the pharmaceutical company that makes the drugs you've been secretly taking. The same drugs you've been giving to me without my knowledge. I set the bottle down carefully. So let me ask you something, did anyone at Davidson know about your fertility suppressor prescription? No, of course not. That would be completely inappropriate. Would it? Because if anyone in your company knew you were taking their client's medication while hiding it from your wife, that starts to look less like a panicked husband and more like someone with access to information about side effects and detection methods. Mark sank back down to the floor. Sarah, I swear on my mother's grave, nobody at work knew anything about the suppressants. I didn't even make the connection to Hendrix until you just said it. I studied his face, looking for tells, for the micro-expressions that might reveal more lies. After 6 years of marriage, I thought I'd known all his habits. Apparently, I'd been wrong about everything else. Here's what's going to happen, I said, pulling out my phone. You're going to call Dr. Santos right now and reschedule your oncology appointment for tomorrow morning. You're going to start treatment, because whatever else you've done, I don't want you to die. And after that? After that, we're going to sit down with Rebecca Melissa and go through every lie you've told me. Every hidden appointment, every secret medication, every conversation with Dr. Martinez that I wasn't told about. Because if we're going to sue Henderson Labs for their negligence, I need to know exactly how much of this disaster was their fault and how much was yours. Mark made the call to Dr. Santos while I sat on our bed, watching him stumble through explanations about family emergency and overwhelming circumstances. His hands shook as he wrote down the new appointment time, tomorrow at 10:15 a.m. They want someone to drive me, he said after hanging up. The initial treatment consultation can take 4 to 6 hours, and they said patients are often emotionally exhausted afterward. Call your brother. Sarah, please. No. I stood up, stepping over the scattered pill bottles. I meant what I said earlier. We're getting divorced, Mark. I'll help you navigate the legal aspects of the Henderson Labs situation because it affects both of us, but I'm not going to hold your hand through cancer treatment after what you've done. My phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca Melissa. Can you come in tomorrow at 2 p.m.? Found something in Henderson's corporate filings you need to see. I showed Mark the message. While you're at your oncology appointment, I'll be learning more about exactly how screwed up this lab situation is. What do you think she found? I don't know, but Rebecca doesn't waste time on small discoveries. I started gathering some of the medication bottles from the floor, reading labels. Mark, how many different doctors have you seen in the past 4 months? What do you mean? I mean you've got pills here from Dr. Martinez, but this prescription bottle is from Dr. Jennifer Walsh at Riverside Family Medicine. And this one is from Dr. Stephen Chen at Downtown Medical Associates. I held up 3 different bottles. That's 3 different doctors prescribing you medication. Mark's face went pale again. Sarah, I can explain. Jesus Christ, what now? I sat down hard in the chair, still clutching the bottles. How many doctors, Mark? How many? 4. Maybe 5. Maybe 5? My voice cracked despite my efforts to stay controlled. You maybe saw 5 different doctors while lying to me about your health? I was trying to get second opinions. And third opinions. I kept hoping someone would tell me the blood work was wrong, that Dr. Martinez had made a mistake. So instead of trusting your primary care physician, you went doctor shopping for someone who would tell you what you wanted to hear? I was scared, he said again, but the words were starting to sound hollow. Mark, do you understand what this means for the Henderson Labs lawsuit? I set the bottles on the nightstand with deliberate care. If you've been seeing multiple doctors and getting multiple prescriptions, there's a paper trail. Insurance records, pharmacy logs, appointment histories. So Rebecca is going to need all of that information to build our case. Which means she's going to discover that you weren't just lying to me, you were lying to multiple healthcare providers about your medical history and medications. The implications were starting to hit him. That could affect the lawsuit? It could affect everything, Mark. If Henderson's lawyers find out you were withholding information from doctors while taking undisclosed medications, they're going to argue that any diagnostic errors were your fault, not their lab's fault. Mark buried his face in his hands. I fucked up everything, haven't I? Yeah, I said simply. You have. My phone rang, Julie calling to check in. I let it go to voicemail, not ready to explain this newest revelation to my sister. I need a complete list, I told Mark. Every doctor you've seen, every prescription you've filled, every appointment you've made since January. All of it. Why? Because tomorrow I'm going to find out what Rebecca discovered in those corporate filings, and I need to know exactly how much more complicated this situation is about to become. I spent the night at Julie's, lying awake on her pull-out couch and staring at the ceiling while Mark's list of doctors and appointments burned in my mind. 5 physicians. 12 separate appointments. Over $3,000 in cash payments to avoid insurance records. The scope of his deception kept expanding like a stain spreading through fabric. At 9:47 a.m., I sat in Rebecca Melissa's office again, this time with a manila folder containing every piece of documentation Mark had given me. Rebecca spread the papers across her conference table like she was laying out evidence for a jury. Sarah, I need to show you what I found in Henderson Labs' corporate structure. She pulled out a thick document marked with sticky notes. Henderson Medical Labs isn't just a small local facility. They're owned by Meridian Healthcare Solutions, which operates 43 labs across Pennsylvania, Ohio, and West Virginia. My coffee cup froze halfway to my lips. 43 labs? All using the same patient management software. All following the same verification protocols that failed in your case. Rebecca flipped to a highlighted section. If their system has been mixing up results for 6 months at just the Henderson location, we're potentially looking at thousands of mishandled tests across their entire network. The room felt like it was spinning. Thousands? I contacted 3 other attorneys yesterday who've been handling medical malpractice cases involving Meridian facilities. Similar complaints, similar patterns of switched results, similar attempts at cover-up. She pulled out her legal pad. Sarah, what you discovered isn't an isolated incident. It's systematic corporate negligence on a massive scale. I set down my coffee with shaking hands. How many people? We won't know until discovery, but preliminary estimates suggest we're looking at several thousand patients who may have received incorrect results. The financial exposure for Meridian could be in the hundreds of millions. Which means they're going to fight this case with everything they have. Exactly. Which brings me to your husband's medical history. Rebecca picked up Mark's doctor list. 5 physicians, multiple prescriptions, cash payments to avoid documentation. Sarah, Meridian's defense team is going to argue that your husband's deceptive medical practices contributed to any diagnostic errors. But the lab mixed up our results completely. They gave me his blood work and him mine. Yes, but they'll claim the mix-up was inconsequential because your husband was already withholding crucial information from his healthcare providers. They'll say that even with correct results, proper diagnosis was impossible due to his dishonesty. I felt sick. So Mark's lies could destroy the entire case? Not destroy, but significantly complicate. However, there's something else. Rebecca's expression shifted. I had my investigator run background checks on the doctors your husband visited. Dr. Jennifer Walsh lost her medical license in Ohio 3 years ago for overprescribing controlled substances. She's been operating in Pennsylvania under a restricted license. What does that mean? It means your husband wasn't just doctor shopping, he was specifically seeking out physicians with questionable practices. Dr. Stephen Shen has been investigated twice for insurance fraud. Dr. Patricia Moore was sanctioned last year for failing to maintain proper patient records. The betrayal found new depths I hadn't known existed. He deliberately chose corrupt doctors? It appears so. Which suggests his deception was more calculated than he's admitted. Rebecca leaned forward. Sarah, I need to ask you something difficult. Is there any possibility your husband knew about Henderson Labs' problems before your appointment? What do you mean? Meridian Healthcare Solutions processes lab work for several major corporations' employee health programs, including Davidson Marketing, where your husband works. She pulled out another document. Mark's own annual physical last year was processed by Henderson Labs. If there had been any previous mix-ups or quality concerns, corporate HR departments would have been notified. My blood went cold. Are you suggesting Mark knew the lab had problems and sent me there anyway? I'm suggesting we need to investigate that possibility. If your husband had any advanced knowledge of Henderson's issues, it changes everything about this case. I thought about Mark's casual tone when I called him from the lab parking lot. How did the blood work go? Everything normal? Not surprised, not concerned. Just routine. How do we find out? I've already submitted a discovery request for all communications between Davidson Marketing and Meridian Healthcare Solutions for the past 2 years. We'll also need to examine your husband's work emails, phone records, and any internal company memos about healthcare providers. Mark will never agree to that. He won't have a choice. If we're going forward with this lawsuit, all potentially relevant information becomes discoverable evidence. Rebecca closed the folder. Sarah, I need you to understand what you're walking into. This isn't just about medical malpractice anymore. We're potentially exposing corporate fraud, systematic negligence, and conspiracy to hide dangerous practices. What about Mark's cancer treatment? That continues regardless. But if we discover he had advanced knowledge of Henderson's problems, he could face criminal charges for recklessly endangering your health. She paused. Are you prepared for that possibility? I stared out the window at the parking lot below, watching normal people go about their normal Tuesday morning routines. 2 weeks ago, my biggest worry had been whether we were timing intercourse correctly for conception. Now I was sitting in a lawyer's office discussing whether my husband might have knowingly sent me to a corrupt medical lab. Rebecca, if Mark knew about Henderson's problems and sent me there anyway, while he was secretly drugging me with fertility suppressants, what kind of charges could he face? Assault, reckless endangerment, conspiracy, potentially attempted poisoning depending on the prosecutor's interpretation. She gathered the papers into neat stacks. But Sarah, that's assuming the worst-case scenario. He might genuinely be a scared cancer patient who made terrible decisions out of panic. Or he might be something much worse. My phone buzzed with a text from Mark, oncology appointment finished. Treatment starts Monday. Can we talk? I showed Rebecca the message. What do I tell him? Nothing about our conversation today. If he's innocent, we don't want to cause unnecessary stress during cancer treatment. If he's not innocent, we don't want to give him time to destroy evidence. I walked out of Rebecca's office with more questions than answers and a growing certainty that everything I thought I knew about my husband was wrong. I drove home in a daze, Rebecca's words echoing in my head. The possibility that Mark might have known about Henderson Labs' problems before sending me there felt like a betrayal so profound I couldn't fully process it. But I needed answers, and I needed them before he had time to prepare more lies. Mark's car was in the driveway when I pulled up at 3:15 p.m. Through the living room window, I could see him on the couch, still wearing the same clothes from his oncology appointment. He looked up when I walked in, his face a mixture of hope and exhaustion. How did it go with Dr. Santos? I asked, staying near the doorway. Stage 1 chronic lymphocytic leukemia, like Dr. Holbrook said. Treatment starts Monday with oral chemotherapy, ibrutinib, 28-day cycles. He gestured to a stack of pamphlets on the coffee table. 92% 5-year survival rate. I'm going to be okay, Sarah. That's good. I set my purse down but didn't sit. Mark, I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth. His shoulders tensed. Okay. When you scheduled my appointment at Henderson Labs, did you know they had problems with their testing procedures? The question hung in the air for several seconds. Mark's face went through a series of micro-expressions, surprise, confusion, then something that looked like calculation. What do you mean, problems? I mean exactly what I asked. Did you know Henderson Labs had issues with accuracy or mix-ups before you suggested I go there for my blood work? Sarah, why would you ask me that? The deflection sent a chill through me. Because Rebecca's investigator found out that Davidson Marketing receives quarterly reports on all healthcare providers in their employee network, including quality assessments and incident reports. Mark's face went pale. I don't read those reports. They go to HR. But you have access to them through the company internet. I pulled out my phone, showing him a screenshot Rebecca had taken of Davidson's employee portal. Every employee with healthcare benefits can review provider ratings and safety records. I've never looked at that section. Mark, your browser history will show every website you visited in the past year. Your work computer logs every internal document you've accessed. I watched his face carefully. So I'll ask you again, did you know Henderson Labs had problems? He stood up abruptly, walking to the window. Even if I had seen something about Henderson, which I didn't, why would I deliberately send you to a bad lab? I don't know. That's what I'm trying to figure out. I moved closer, studying his profile. Rebecca found something else interesting. Henderson Labs processes blood work for Davidson's annual employee physicals. You've been going there for 3 years. So if they mixed up your results with someone else's during one of those visits, you would have gotten a call from HR asking about discrepancies. I pulled out another document. Company policy requires employees to report any medical provider issues that could affect insurance coverage. Mark turned around, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before, cold calculation. Are you wearing a wire, Sarah? The question was so unexpected, so paranoid, that I actually laughed. Am I wearing a wire? Mark, what the hell is wrong with you? You're asking very specific questions, like someone coached you on exactly what to say. He stepped closer. Did your lawyer tell you to get me to admit something? My lawyer told me that if you had advanced knowledge of Henderson's problems, it changes our entire case. I held my ground. She also told me that your pattern of seeking out doctors with questionable licenses suggests more calculation than panic. What doctors with questionable licenses? Dr. Jennifer Walsh lost her license in Ohio for overprescribing controlled substances. Dr. Stephen Chen is under investigation for insurance fraud. Dr. Patricia Moore was sanctioned for improper record keeping. I recited the names from memory. Those aren't random doctors, Mark. Those are specifically doctors who don't follow standard protocols. Mark sat down heavily, his head in his hands. Sarah, I was desperate. I was looking for doctors who wouldn't ask too many questions about why I wanted fertility suppressants while married. Or doctors who wouldn't report unusual requests to insurance companies or medical boards. Maybe that too. The admission felt like a physical blow. So you did deliberately choose corrupt physicians. I chose physicians who would give me what I needed without judgment. He looked up at me. Is that really so different from women who lie to get birth control, or people who exaggerate symptoms to get anxiety medication? Yes, Mark, it's completely different. Because you weren't just lying to get medication for yourself, you were drugging me with it. My voice rose. And now I'm finding out you might have knowingly sent me to a lab with quality problems while I had those drugs in my system. I didn't know about Henderson's problems, I swear to God. Then you won't mind if Rebecca subpoenas your work computer and browser history. The silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken truths. Finally, Mark spoke in a voice so quiet I almost couldn't hear him. There was an incident last year. Employee named Janet Morrison got test results showing she was pregnant when she'd had a hysterectomy 5 years earlier. HR sent out a memo about double-checking all lab work from Henderson. My legs went weak. I sat down hard in the nearest chair. You knew, I whispered. You knew Henderson Labs made mistakes, and you sent me there anyway. The room started spinning. I gripped the arms of the chair, trying to process what Mark had just admitted. He'd known Henderson Labs made mistakes. He'd known, and he'd sent me there anyway. The Janet Morrison incident, I said slowly, my voice barely steady. When exactly did that happen? Mark wouldn't meet my eyes. October 15th last year. 5 months before you started taking fertility suppressants. 7 months before you suggested I get blood work done at Henderson. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Mark, did you send me to Henderson Labs hoping they'd make a mistake? No, that's not. Because if you wanted to delay me finding out about your fertility drugs, sending me to a lab known for mix-ups would be a pretty convenient way to buy time. The pieces were clicking together with horrible clarity. Raw results mean retesting. Retesting means delays. Delays mean more time to figure out how to hide what you've been doing to me. Mark's face crumpled. Sarah, I know how this looks, but I wasn't thinking that strategically. I was just panicked and desperate and... Bullshit. I stood up, pacing to keep my hands from shaking. You researched doctors with questionable licenses. You found physicians who wouldn't ask hard questions. You chose a lab with documented quality issues. That's not panic, Mark. That's planning. My phone rang, Rebecca Melissa. I answered immediately. Sarah, where are you right now? Her voice was sharp, urgent. At home with Mark. Why? Get out. Right now. Don't pack anything, just leave. What's wrong? We just received Henderson Lab's internal incident reports from Discovery. Your husband didn't just know about the Janet Morrison case, he filed a complaint about his own mixed-up results in September last year. Abnormal liver enzymes that weren't his, switched with someone else's normal cholesterol panel. The phone slipped in my sweaty palm. Mark was staring at me, and I could see in his face that he knew exactly what Rebecca was telling me. Sarah, are you there? Rebecca's voice sounded far away. He filed his own complaint, I repeated, watching Mark's expression. More than that. The complaint form asks if the patient wants to be removed from the facility's client list or continue using their services. Mark checked continue services and added a handwritten note saying he understood the risks and accepted them. I sank back into the chair. He deliberately chose to keep using a lab he knew was incompetent. Gets worse. The Henderson intake system flags patients who've had previous issues. When you scheduled your appointment, the system would have shown his complaint history. The receptionist would have asked if he wanted to use a different facility. I looked at Mark, who was now standing by the back door like he was planning to run. Someone at Henderson asked if I wanted to use a different lab, didn't they, Mark? He didn't answer. Rebecca, I need to call you back. I hung up and faced my husband. When I scheduled my appointment, they asked if I wanted to go somewhere else because of your previous complaint. What did you tell them? Sarah, please. What did you tell them, Mark? His shoulders sagged in defeat. I told them you wanted to use Henderson specifically because it was convenient to your work schedule. The final piece clicked into place. Not only had Mark known about Henderson's problems, he'd actively ensured I'd be sent there despite those problems. While I had his fertility suppressants in my system. While he was hiding cancer symptoms. While he knew the lab had a documented history of potentially dangerous mix-ups. You used me as your guinea pig, I whispered. You wanted to see what would happen if someone with fertility drugs in their system got tested at an incompetent lab. That's not what I was thinking. Then tell me what you were thinking, Mark. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you turned me into a test subject for your own sick experiment. Mark moved toward the back door, his hand on the handle. I think I should call a lawyer. Too late for that, I said, pulling my phone back out. Because now I'm calling the police. I dialed 911 with Mark still standing by the back door, his hand frozen on the handle like he couldn't decide whether to run or stay. 911, what's your emergency? I need to report someone drugging me without my consent. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. My husband has been putting prescription medication in my food for 6 weeks. Mark's face went white. Sarah, hang up the phone. Ma'am, are you in immediate danger? The dispatcher asked. I looked at Mark, who had taken a step back from the door. I don't think so, but I just discovered he's been systematically lying about medical conditions while giving me fertility suppressants without my knowledge. Are you injured or feeling ill? No, but I need someone here to document what's happened before he destroys evidence. I could see Mark's eyes darting toward his desk where he kept his laptop. He's been seeing multiple doctors under false pretenses and deliberately sent me to a medical lab he knew was incompetent. Officers are being dispatched to your location. Can you stay on the line? Yes. I moved to block Mark's path to his desk. Ma'am, is it illegal to put prescription medication in someone's food without telling them? Yes, that would be considered assault, possibly poisoning depending on the circumstances. Are you able to provide evidence? I looked at the pill bottles still scattered across the bedroom floor, the lab reports on the coffee table, the stack of oncology pamphlets. Yes, there's a lot of evidence. Mark finally spoke, his voice cracked and desperate. Sarah, please don't do this. I'm starting cancer treatment on Monday. Cancer treatment that you delayed for 3 months while you were drugging me. I kept the phone pressed to my ear. Ma'am, the officers should know that there are multiple prescription bottles here from different doctors, and paperwork showing he knew the medical lab had quality problems before sending me there. Understood. Officers should arrive within 10 minutes. Mark sank onto the couch, his head in his hands. 6 years of marriage, Sarah. Are you really going to destroy everything over this? I didn't destroy anything, Mark. You did. I stayed standing, keeping distance between us. You destroyed it the day you decided to start lying to me. You destroyed it more when you started drugging me. And you finished destroying it when you deliberately sent me to an incompetent lab while I had your medication in my system. I never meant for any of this to happen. You filed a complaint about Henderson Labs in September. You knew they mixed up results. When I called to schedule my appointment, they asked if I wanted to use a different facility because of your complaint history, and you specifically told them I wanted Henderson. I could hear sirens in the distance. That wasn't an accident, Mark. That was a choice. The sirens grew louder. Mark looked toward the front window, then back at me. What happens now? Now you face the consequences of 6 months of lies. I walked to the window and saw 2 police cars pulling into our driveway. The officers are here. Ma'am, I see the patrol units arriving, the dispatcher said. You can hang up now unless you need continued assistance. Thank you. I ended the call and opened the front door for 2 uniformed officers, a woman about my age and an older man with graying temples. Mrs. Patterson? I'm Officer Martinez, this is Officer Chen. We received a report about medication being administered without consent. Yes, my husband has been putting prescription fertility suppressants in food we were sharing. I have the medication bottles and lab work showing the drugs in my system. I gestured toward the living room where Mark sat motionless on the couch. Officer Chen looked around, taking in the scattered papers and pill bottles. Sir, I need you to stand up and keep your hands visible. Mark complied, moving slowly. Officers, I want to cooperate fully. I'm starting cancer treatment on Monday, and I know this looks bad, but... Sir, we'll need to hear your statement, but first we need to secure the scene and document the evidence Mrs. Patterson mentioned. Officer Martinez pulled out her notebook. Ma'am, can you walk me through what happened and show me the evidence you mentioned? For the next hour, I explained everything, the switched lab results, the fertility suppressants in our shared protein smoothies, Mark's hidden cancer diagnosis, his deliberate choice to use Henderson Labs despite knowing their history of mix-ups. The officers photographed the pill bottles, the lab reports, the documentation showing Mark's previous complaint. Mrs. Patterson, Officer Martinez said after taking detailed notes, based on what you told us and the evidence here, we have grounds to arrest your husband for assault and reckless endangerment. Are you prepared to press charges? I looked at Mark, who was sitting in our kitchen chair with his hands cuffed behind his back, tears streaming down his face. 3 months ago, we'd been planning our 7th anniversary trip to Ireland. Now he was about to be arrested for drugging me. Yes, I said quietly. I'm pressing charges. 6 months later, I stood in the hallway outside courtroom 3B, watching Rebecca Melissa organize our final documents for the settlement hearing. The manila folders that had once seemed overwhelming now felt like old friends, each one representing a piece of the puzzle that had completely rearranged my life. The final numbers, Rebecca said, handing me a summary sheet. Henderson Labs and their parent company Meridian Healthcare Solutions are settling for $12.4 million. Your portion is $2.7 million, plus medical monitoring for life. I scanned the document, still having trouble believing the figures. And the systemic changes? Mandatory double verification protocols at all 43 Meridian facilities. Independent oversight board. Quarterly audits by the state health department. Rebecca smiled. Sarah, what you exposed has changed medical lab standards across 3 states. Through the courtroom windows, I could see protesters holding signs, patient safety first and no more cover-ups. The Henderson Labs case had become a rallying point for medical reform advocates, something I never could have imagined when I first walked into that sterile waiting room with 2 wrong lab reports. My phone buzzed with a text from Julie. Verdict on Mark's criminal case came in. Guilty on all counts. Sentencing next Thursday. Mark had been convicted of assault, reckless endangerment, and conspiracy to commit fraud. His cancer treatment had continued throughout the trial, ironic, since the early detection that might have saved his life had come from the very deception that destroyed our marriage. His oncologist testified that the 3-month delay in seeking treatment, caused by Mark's own lies, had allowed the leukemia to progress from stage 1 to stage 2. Any regrets about the criminal prosecution? Rebecca asked, noticing my expression. No. The answer surprised me with its certainty. He made calculated decisions that could have killed me. The testosterone suppressants interacted with my blood chemistry in ways that could have masked other serious conditions. If I'd actually needed medical care during those 6 weeks, doctors would have been working with completely wrong baseline information. The courtroom doors opened, and Dr. Holbrook emerged with her legal team. She looked older, grayer than she had 9 months ago. Henderson Labs had been shut down permanently. Meridian had fired their entire Pennsylvania management team. Mrs. Patterson, Dr. Holbrook approached hesitantly. I wanted to say something before the hearing. I waited. We found 47 more cases during the investigation. 47 patients who received incorrect results over 18 months. Her voice cracked slightly. Your decision to fight this publicly probably saved lives. What about the patient whose diagnosis was delayed 6 weeks? I asked. The one you mentioned in your office. Linda Rodriguez. 63 years old. The delay pushed her lymphoma from stage 2 to stage 3. Dr. Holbrook paused. She's in remission now, but her prognosis would have been better with earlier treatment. I nodded, feeling the weight of what might have been, for Linda Rodriguez, for other patients, for me if I hadn't gotten lucky with a lab technician's mistake. The hearing starting, Rebecca said gently. As we walked into the courtroom, I thought about the strange chain of events that had brought me here. A clerical error had revealed my husband's betrayal while simultaneously exposing systematic medical negligence. The worst mistake of a lab technician's career had saved my life and potentially dozens of others. The judge called the case, Patterson versus Henderson Medical Labs and Meridian Healthcare Solutions. I took my seat at the plaintiff's table, no longer the confused woman who had stared at wrong lab results in a sterile waiting room. The lab had mixed up my results with my husband's, and in that terrible mistake, I'd found the truth that saved everything.